Well, I agree, and I sometimes play poker with friends. Fox taped this game where one guy thought he'd won with a pair of queens.
Sure.
Queen.
Wow.
You have a king?
A flush?
After I won this nice pot, I asked my poker buddies, what do you think of the laws that protect people by banning gambling?
We are intelligent enough to know our limits. Leave the government out of it and let me decide for myself.
Just like they do.
Don't take my right away from me.
We're not all mentally and psychologically strong enough or able to govern ourselves, with some people.
The liberal wants government to do something.
The addictive element of gambling forces, the government to step in because it is addictive.
That's stupid. Smoking cigarettes is an addictive behavior. They don't prevent us from smoking in our own home. They don't prevent us from drinking in our own home.
However,
Now, half the states ban gambling like that with friends in your home. They don't enforce it, and that gives the police power to enforce it on people they don't like. Your thought?
The Friday night poker game, leave it in the privacy of your own home.
Do you worry about the people who have a gambling problem?
Absolutely, and that's why when you do it commercially, the difference between the Friday night poker game that you play with your friends, you're not lending them 10 grand to play with. You're not putting a lien on somebody's house.
I might.
Well, then obviously, yeah, we can agree. Yeah, we can agree they're not good friends. But that's not what, when you do it commercially, that's when it crosses the line. That's what makes it predatory. It's a business
commercial.
It's because it's a business model.
So what?
The business model for commercial gambling, especially when sponsored by the government, is to make 40 to 60% of their profits come from people who have a problem with it. So when we talk about it's a healthy endeavor, we hear that most people gamble without a problem. But the question for folks like Patrick is, how much money do commercial gambling interests make from people who are problem gamblers?
If all of us became problem gamblers overnight and bankrupted ourselves within 6 months, the industry dies in 6 months and a day.
Well, that's pretty unrealistic. I mean,
but it's also it's no more unrealistic than to suggest that as we increase the opportunity to gamble, that more and more and more of us will develop these serious and more serious problems, and we all go to hell in a handcart. Because what history of this country and other countries that have far more gambling and have done for centuries tells us is that there's sort of a natural ceiling to this. Are there problem gamblers? Yes. They're a tiny fraction of the population, and as gambling opportunities expand, the proportion...
When England legalized internet poker, the problem gambling did not go up.
Exactly. The same experience in Australia and other countries that...
That's new to me. I haven't seen a study that wasn't funded by the gambling interest that suggests that gambling addiction rates don't go up. Gambling
what is addiction?
What is addiction?
What do you mean by addiction?
Well, addiction is when people lose control of the gambling, meaning that it takes over their life, that they take money that they use for college tuitions or paying them.
So I'm not an addict, even though I gamble all the time because I like it.
This is because you're in control. You stick to your limits. You're not borrowing money to gamble.
John, this is really important. See, addiction is a layperson's term because there is no scientific or medical definition. Yeah. What we're really talking about are bad habits, some of which become tragically bad. We're not talking about a medical illness that removes responsibility or self-control from an individual.
What's elitist is the people that own commercial gambling houses, Steve Wynn, Gary Loverman, the CEO of Caesars, Jim Murren and MGM, all these guys who promote casinos, the politicians that partner with casino interests, none of these people gamble themselves. They don't lose their own money gambling. What's more elitist than that?
I support the right to gamble for the same reason Thomas Jefferson did. As he said, it's a tax on the willing. It's far more preferable in all kinds of levels than a coercive tax. It's a voluntary tax.
All right, Les, let's talk about your passion, the casino. The slot machine is where the big money is.
That's right.
It's the worst bet for the biggest suckers. They just get hung up on it.
That's right.
But they are freely choosing to do that.
The idea is it's a game that's rigged against the player. So the question here is
all casino games are because the house takes a cut.
But the heart of the issue here is slot machines are illegal unless government is a partner. So you have government partnering with slot machine interests, casinos, who are actively promoting and exploiting citizens through slot machines.
Government used to ban gambling.
That's right. It was criminalized, but you could do it on your own. You know, if you did it for profit, it was criminalized. But if you had a Friday night poker game, you know, most people leave you alone because you're not, you're not, lending people money. You know, no one's jumping off parking garages like they do in casinos on a regular basis. I mean, it's a totally different line.
I got to pick up on that. They're jumping off parking lots on a regular basis. Your website says addicted gamblers are abandoning their children in casino parking lots around the world.
There are dozens of, just in one state alone, in the state of Pennsylvania, there's been dozens of instances.
How many kids were abandoned or hurt or died?
At least 20 kids in the last 2 years in just the state of Pennsylvania alone, without even hesitation.
Kids left for an hour? What do you mean?
Left for several hours in like 10-degree weather because the casinos.
Were the kids hurt?
The casinos, in partnership with government, are allowed to go free play.
Were the kids hurt?
Oh, yeah, the state took the kids away. Yeah, I mean, imagine if imagine leaving your kids for 6 hours in a 20-degree weather. Of course, they're hurt.
We need to remember, even in the most tragic cases of pathological gambling, it's very, very hard to disentangle all of the things that are going wrong in that person's life. Sometimes, I'd be the first one to admit, the problem gambling is the catalyst, but very often it's some substance abuse of another kind. The people who get into these problems tend to have difficulties coping in many ways.
Anyway, let's move on to another way to gamble.
If you've been to the track, most states have at least one. Usually they just race horses, but sometimes they race dogs. The only way you could bet on these races used to be to come to the track and place your bet here. Of course, some people didn't want to come all the way here, so they bet with bookmakers illegally. Politicians then said, that's terrible. Bookies are criminals. They steal the public's money. We'll create off-track betting businesses that will replace bookies and will promote the public welfare.
Let him go, baby. Come on, buddy.
So now, in many states, people can make convenient bets at off-track betting storefronts.
How's that working out?
Off-track betting is representative of how much government's experiment with gambling has failed. Off-track betting has been subsidized by state governments like New York to keep them alive.
But let's stop on that concept for a moment. Think about that the bookies were making so much money taking bets that the state said, this is mafia crime. We have to take it over to clean it up. Government is so incompetent that doing the same thing that the bookies were doing, they lose money in New York City.
Listen, incompetence aside, it just shows how much, when government gets into the gambling business, it shows how much it ends up being a failed policy.
New York's off-track betting was so bloated, they had 68 offices,
right.
A 1,300-person workforce, a fleet of 87 vehicles. It's government.
Only government can lose money as a bookie.
Thank you, Patrick. Les?